Discover 3 spine-chilling true fall horror stories that reveal sinister, haunted secrets. As the vibrant colors of fall began to fade in their quiet suburb of Ohio, unease crept silently through the neighborhood like an unwelcome chill. Sarah, a single mother, worked late nights at the local diner. The comforting smell of coffee and home-cooked meals faded long before she returned. Each time she opened the modest door to their home, the shadows welcomed her like old friends, and her 10-year-old son, Eli, was left to navigate the alone hours, his vivid imagination filling the silence that haunted their small house. Something felt off. One evening on her drive home, Sarah glanced at her neighbor's porch. Mr. Thompson sat there, his shadowed figure hardly illuminated beneath the flickering street lamp. She shivered, an instinctual warning prickling at her skin. "Mom, Mr. Thompson came by last night," Eli said the next morning, his eyes wide with both fear and excitement. He told her of the late-night visits, the strange man's whispers weaving tales about dark family histories and forgotten crimes. Eli described how Mr. Thompson's face contorted with excitement and fear as he shared his stories, but they were no longer just harmless fables. Her heart raced, dread clawed its way into her chest. Was this innocent storytelling or something more sinister? Sarah found herself standing in front of Mr. Thompson's house, her pulse thumping in her ears. He greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach his cool, calculating eyes. "You must hear the story of this land," he began, revealing tales of ownership, tragedy, and curses that rippled through their community like a restless spirit seeking release. Each word hung in the air heavy like smoke, filling Sarah with a foreboding sense. Something terrible lingered long before them. Then the eerie occurrences began. Shadows flickered just beyond the corners of her vision. Soft whispers echoed in the empty hallways. Eli confided that he felt like someone was always watching. The lights would dim inexplicably, and dirt messages appeared at their doorstep, driving Sarah deeper into paranoia. The warmth of their home felt cold now, shadows stretched longer, creeping closer. Reality slipped away, entwining their lives with an insidious fear that clung to them like a thick fog. On Halloween night, the veil between the past sins and their present life began to unravel. The atmosphere crackled with a menacing energy, and as she confronted her fears, she realized the neighborhood held secrets meant to stay buried. The doors of her reality opened wide, and chills raced through her as she tried to protect Eli from Mr. Thompson's predatory gaze. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." Just when Sarah believed she understood everything, a chilling knock sounded in the dead of night. Her heart raced. It was Mr. Thompson standing at their door, a sinister smile etched on his face. "I've only just scratched the surface," his low voice echoing with a dangerous edge. "There are things you don't understand yet. Things about Eli." Fear tangled with confusion, and the shadows loomed, stretching and bending around them. Sarah knew then that the horrors of the past were not done with her yet. A cold sweat broke out on Sarah's forehead as she stared at Mr. Thompson. His presence filled the doorway, the shadows swirling behind him like dark tendrils reaching toward her and Eli. "What do you mean about Eli?" she managed to stammer, her voice barely a whisper. Mr. Thompson tilted his head, a mockery of concern etching across his face. "Oh, dear Sarah, it's not just stories I tell. The boy, he carries something within him." His eyes glinted with a fervor that sent shivers racing down Sarah's spine. An echo of the past. You can't protect him from it. Before she could protest, he stepped back into the darkness, beckoning them with a crooked finger. "Come with me," he urged. "Tonight, he needs to know." "No!" Sarah shouted, panic surging as she gripped Eli's small hand, willing him to feel her fear, willing him to understand that this man was not a friend. "You can't take my son!" But Eli's curiosity, ever-present and insatiable, pulled him closer to the door. "Mum, maybe he knows something we don't. What if it's important?" Terror clawed at Sarah's heart. "It's not important, it's dangerous," she yelled, her voice echoing through the silence of the night. Mr. Thompson chuckled lowly, the sound like gravel scraping against metal. "You don't understand, Sarah. The night is alive with voices, secrets, and truths come to surface. Eli has to see it for himself." With that, he turned and walked down the porch steps, fading into the inky blackness of the street. "Mom, please." Eli's voice trembled, and Sarah felt the tug of his hopeful gaze. "I want to go." "No!" She pulled him close, cradling him to her side. Every instinct screamed at her. Something was much darker here than she'd ever imagined. "You don't know what he wants." "But he's just a man, Mom. He's not a monster." A chill wind whipped around them, and a scream echoed in her mind, memories of the stories, of those fables woven by Mr. Thompson. They flashed through her thoughts, revealing glimpses of a past so horrifying it threatened to unravel the very fabric of her world. Eli, with innocence that still clung to him, didn't see the shadows gathering, the way the night thickened with energy. He only saw the adventure, the allure of a secret whispered in twilight. Suddenly, the air grew heavy. The familiar crunch of autumn leaves shifted outside, a quiet rustle that held a latent danger. Sarah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "We need to stay inside," she insisted, her voice shaking. "We don't know what waits out there." But Eli's expression faltered, doubt creeping in. What if he's right? What if we're missing the truth? Sarah hesitated, the weight of her decision pressed on her like the cold grip of dread. If she refused Eli's wish, would it shatter a bond that was already fragile? Or would it save them from something more horrific that lay just outside their door? Before she could respond, something crashed against the back door, sending splintered wood flying across the kitchen floor. "Mom!" Eli's eyes widened in terror. Heart racing, she spun around, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Stay behind me!" she shouted, positioning herself as a barrier between her son and whatever darkness lurked just out of sight. The door rattled violently, shudders echoing through the hushed house. Each knock resonated like thunder in her mind, drawing closer with a relentless persistence. What had come to claim them? "Sarah!" The voice, weak and desperate, seeped through the air. It wasn't Mr. Thompson's voice. It was deeper, more familiar, a voice she thought she'd never hear again. Just like echoes of the past, binding and suffocating, something unearthly stirred between the shadows. Eli squeezed her hand tightly, fear pulsating in the air as the night hung thick with potential doom. "Who's there?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling against the chaos, but answers fizzled in the air like smoke, leaving only silence, until it wasn't silence at all. The door burst open, revealing not only the darkened figure of Mr. Thompson, but others behind him, faces blurred, features twisted with malevolence. The night could no longer hold its secrets. "What do you want?" she screamed, heart-pounding, fearing the answer. Mr. Thompson grinned widely, his eyes alive with insanity. "Your son has a story to hear. The night's just begun." As they stepped closer, shadows surged into her home, wrapping around her and Eli like a suffocating fog, and a sense of dread washed over her. No truths were safe tonight, and with dread mounting within her, she knew with a terrible certainty that her world was about to fall into darkness. What horror awaited them in the truth? The shadows closed in, thickening and writhing like living beings. Sarah's instincts screamed at her to flee, but her feet felt anchored to the kitchen floor. Eli stood beside her, eyes wide and unblinking, a mixture of fear and twisted fascination reflecting in them. The figures emerged from the darkness, their movements serpentine, creeping unnaturally close, filling the air with a cloying dread. "Sarah!" The voice echoed again, familiar yet wrong. It tore at her resolve, pulling memories from buried corners of her mind. Memories of laughter at the dinner table, of evenings spent watching her mother plug the kettle into the wall. But where was her mother now, caught in this suffocating night? "Mom, please." "I want to know," Eli whimpered, leaving his mother's side. His little hand slipped from her grasp, reaching toward the looming figures before them. "No, Eli, stay back!" Sarah shouted. The fear coursing through her veins surged as she lunged forward, but the weight of unseen hands pressed down on her chest, holding her in place, a vice of anxiety twisting tighter. "Let him go," Mr. Thompson rasped, his lips curling into a predatory smile. "He belongs with us now. He bears the mark." Eli shivered, stepping into the dark, tugged by something deeper than terror, an ancient pull that beckoned him toward the unknown. "What mark, Mr. Thompson? What do you mean?" he asked, a child's naive curiosity clashing violently with the horror enveloping them. A low murmur rippled through the crowd behind Thompson, a chorus of what seemed like fragmented whispers merging into an incomprehensible chant. Their faces were obscured, buried in shadow, but Sarah could feel the weight of their gazes piercing through her. Their intentions lay heavy in the air, a palpable threat that set her nerves ablaze. "Eli!" she screamed again, desperation clawing at her throat. She felt the warmth of tears trickling down her cheeks, leaving trails of the last remnants of her sanity. "You don't need to know what they are telling you." The boy spun back to her, confusion clouding his youthful eyes. "Mom, I have to. They're saying I'm special. I don't understand." "Special?" Mr. Thompson's laugh echoed, a bone-chilling sound that vibrated through the walls. "Oh, dear child, you possess more than mere specialness. You are central to a story far older than you can fathom, a story wanting to be told." Suddenly, from the shadows emerged a cold wind that swirled around them, pulling at Sarah's hair and clothes, wrapping her in icy tendrils. Panic flared within her as she felt the walls closing in, fibers of the house whispering secrets she wasn't prepared to bear. "Stop! I won't let you take him!" Her voice rang out strong, even as the floor trembled beneath her feet, consciousness beginning to fray at the edges. Those murky figures shifted, their forms blending into a chaotic dance, enveloping what sounded like a distant wailing chorus. The air thickened with static energy, causing the hairs on her arm to stand on end. An unholy light flickered in their depths, illuminating patches of twisted faces and hollow eyes, stripped of humanity. "Every truth has a price," Mr. Thompson crooned, his presence looming impossibly larger. "Tonight is no different. You will choose who you wish to lose." "Choose?" Sarah echoed, disbelief sharpening her voice. Her heart battered against her ribcage, drowning out every rational thought. She could not lose Eli. Not now. "I will lose no one!" But deep inside she knew choices lay ahead, each drenched in shadow and despair. The spectres loomed closer, their collective hunger palpable, the very essence of darkness gnashing teeth and yearning for flesh. The chant peaked, and she saw it then, a glimmer of what could be, a version of the future where Eli was wrapped in the folds of the night, where he disappeared into the ghostly embrace of fate. With her resolve teetering, Sarah made her choice. "We will face this together," she called out, momentarily reclaiming ground. But the night laughed back, and in the throes of pure chaos, the shadows lunged. In that moment, a piercing scream sliced through the oppressive air, reverberating off the walls, ushering in silence as everything went black. Then came the explosion of light. What truth lay waiting in the maze of shadows, unable to escape? What figures could emerge in the chaos? Sarah opened her eyes to a world drenched in blinding light, the kitchen transformed into a nightmare, painted in stark contrasts. The air hummed with electric tension, each breath feeling like an invitation to an unseen terror. Shadows hung at the edges of her vision, lingering and swirling like thoughts of dread. "Eli!" she shouted, the desperate cry clashing with the eerie silence. Panic twisted her stomach. Last she had seen, her son had been right by her side, his small form consumed by the swirling figures. "Where are you?" The brightness faded, leaving the room dim, yet oppressive. A low moan crept along the walls, resonating with the remnants of the chant that still echoed in her mind. She felt as if the very substance of her home had shifted, memories creeping in corners, sudden glimpses of its warm familiarity now twisted into something sinister. "Mom!" Eli's voice drifted from somewhere deep within that darkness, an echo caught between time and reality. It sounded weak, frail. She took a hesitant step forward, heart thumping in a terrified cadence. "Eli!" Her voice cracked as she fought against the feeble thrum of fear threatening to consume her. The shadows seemed to shift and pulse like living entities. The figures loomed ever closer, their intentions caging her, echoing the warning of Mr. Thompson. "Every truth has a price." "Come to me," she called, forcing the words past the lump in her throat. She strained to hear any response, any sign of her child, but the answering void seeped into her bones. Her palms began to sweat, a cold dread tightening over her heart. In the distance, a flicker of movement caught her eye. One of the figures stepped closer, still shrouded by darkness. The air grew denser, a suffocating weight pressing down on her spirit. She could barely make out a face, hidden beneath the cloak of shadows, but she recognized the eyes, hollows painted with sorrow and despair. "Mom!" Eli's voice again, closer this time. She whirled, searching frantically, each twist of her body pulling at the rising knot of panic. In that instant, the shadows recoiled as if repelled by her determination. Elation surged within her as she spotted a flicker of her son beyond the dark veil. "I see you. Hold on." The figures faltered, shifting uneasily, as though caught between a command they didn't want to obey. They hesitated, allowing her a sliver of light as she rushed forward, grasping the thread of hope. "Mom! Help!" Eli was trapped now, caught within a web of darkness. Her heart sank. She could see the fear etched on his face. It mirrored her own unfurling dread. "Stay calm! I'm coming!" she barked, though they both knew that the distance already felt insurmountable. Barely a few feet stood between them, but the shadowy figures manifested like an insufferable wall, gnashing teeth and hungry for her child. "No!" She lunged, adrenaline coursing as she bashed against the suffocating air. A visceral scream erupted. She could feel heat wash over her, merging desperation with rage as she raced through the blackness. The shadows surged back, filling every gap with limbs that reached, clawing at her, eager to draw her back into their depths. They pulled at her clothes and her skin, desperate to maintain their hold. Suddenly she realized the truth. The price wasn't her son, but her own sanity. She could feel it unraveling, tendrils of memory slipping through her fingers as fear clawed hungrily. The voices morphed again, the chant now a cacophony of her greatest insecurities and failures. "Let him go!" she screamed, conjuring strength from deep within. The shadows hesitated, and she tore through the throng, carving a path towards Eli, but every step felt hollow, laden with despair. There it was, a distance close enough to touch, heart-stopping yet excruciatingly far. With desperate longing, she reached out. The darkness convulsed, and in that final moment of stark clarity, their eyes met. "Mom!" Eli's cry rang like a bell, shattering the eerie stillness around them. But the shadows trembled with the promise of sacrifice. Would she dare choose herself over her child? The chaos danced around them, feeding off her indecision like a beast hungering for flesh. With trembling hands, Sarah made her choice, but as she pulled Eli toward the light, a shape unfurled behind her. "Sarah." Mr. Thompson spoke from the gloom, a sinister grin splitting his face. "You've already made your decision." The flickering light dimmed, the shadows growled eagerly, and Sarah's heart dropped into the abyss. In the breathless silence that followed, she realized the darkness had one last wretched demand. What would she sacrifice when faced with the true horrors lurking in her choices? The answer twisted cruelly in the night, and as she turned to face it, the shadows closed in once more, grinning wider still. What price would she pay to save her son? As the chant began anew, flickering uncertainty loomed heavy. The shadows pulsed with an energy that felt alive, darting and weaving around Sarah as she stood at the crux of a decision that could shatter everything she held dear. The weight of uncertainty pressed down, tight and suffocating. "Mom!" Eli's voice cracked again, a desperate pleading that clawed at her heart. The flickering shadows formed grotesque shapes, promises of what lay beyond the veil of familiarity that now concealed her son. Sarah could barely breathe. Her chest felt crushed under the weight of screams, yet to be uttered. "Eli, I'm coming!" she shouted, voice quaking, though each word tasted bitter on her tongue. The shadows surged forward, a tide hungry for her despair, pulling her closer until her skin tingled with the essence of their touch. They whispered promises cloaked in dread, memories of failure, whispers of doubt, threats of unworthiness encircled her like a noose. "Don't lose hope, Sarah." A voice, familiar and distant, pierced through the gloom. It was Mr. Thompson, his outstretched hand beckoning ominously. "You made a choice when you stepped into this reality. You wanted to know the truths buried beneath your perfect little life, remember?" His laughter mingled with the growls of shadows, a cacophony that eviscerated her resolve. But deep inside, beneath the noise, a memory stirred. Days spent bathed in Eli's laughter, nights spent reading stories while he snuggled against her, his sleepy eyelids fluttering as she whispered dreams into his ear. "Shut up," she spat back, heart racing as she fought against the shadows gnawing at her senses. This was no time for doubts to wrestle against love. With renewed vigor she pushed forward, eyes locked on Eli's frightened face, sinking beneath layers of darkness. The closer she got, the more the shadows seemed to writhe, contorting into tormented faces that mirrored her anguish. Their wails pierced through her thoughts, distorting reason and twisting her view of what was real. "Mom, please!" Eli's cry splintered her heart into pieces. She reached out again, her fingertips nearly brushing against his, but every inch gained felt like an arduous eternity. "Together, Sarah," Mr. Thompson murmured, his smile widening as if relishing her pain. The shadows were drawn toward her torment, emboldened by her indecision, ready to ensnare her completely. They pressed closer, the heat of their bodies thrumming against her skin. She could feel it, their intent, a sickening desire to claim her sanity, to drown her in despair. In that moment, fiery fury ignited within her. Sarah tore through the damning fog, her voice rising above the chaos. "I love him! You can't take him from me!" With every ounce of strength, she pushed through the outstretched limbs of shadows that howled in fury, staggering against the weight of the dark reality. She grasped Eli's arm, and everything fractured. Light and darkness exploded into a frenzy around them. Finally, their hands met. She yanked him toward her, a primal instinct seizing her consciousness. The shadows shrieked, recoiling in agony, unwilling to release their grip. Eli's eyes widened in confusion and hope. She could feel it too, the warmth of the bond they shared. But before they could pull free, the ground beneath them trembled. Cracks of light seeped through the floor, exposing the void beneath. She realized the darkness wasn't just around them, but deeply rooted in the very fabric of her home. "Let's go!" Sarah shouted, adrenaline surging as she tried to pull Eli closer, but the shadows lashed out, ripping at her sanity, and suddenly they were engulfed in cold darkness once more. And then silence. When the shadows receded, they stood in an eerie twilight. The familiar layout of their home was gone. Walls twisted, chairs floating suspended in the air, and echoes of laughter now resided in a creeping whisper. The air filled with an unsettling calm, leaving her alone to wonder what monstrosity awaited them next. "What just happened?" Eli breathed, his small voice trembling, eyes darting around, slowly recognizing the treachery of their surroundings. Behind them, a low murmur curled through the air, clear and distinct. "Did you think you could escape the price, Sarah?" Suddenly, the room began to shift again. Walls expanded like a heartbeat. She could barely see, drowning in an unsettling fog as the chant grew louder, each syllable echoing with cruel laughter. "Where are we?" she managed to ask, dread gripping her throat. "Only you can determine that," Mr. Thompson's voice echoed from the shadows. "You're still part of the game." Sarah's heart thundered as the shadows swirled, a malevolent dance hinting at a sinister truth that remained yet undiscovered. What bargain had she unknowingly struck? Was escape even possible when shackled to the darkness? The night deepened and she understood. The real terror was just beginning. A chill slithered down Sarah's spine, and the unsettling fog thickened, wrapping around her like a suffocating shroud. Eli clutched her hand tighter, his small fingers trembling, echoing the pulse of terror in her own heart. She shot a glance at him, and in his eyes she saw the reflection of her fear. The walls swirled, swirling hues of midnight blue and sickly green, distorting the room in a nightmarish dance. It reminded her of waking up in a fever dream, where reality bled into nightmare and she could never remember how she got there. But this was no fever. It was an awakening to something deeply sinister. "Mom, I don't know what's happening." Eli's voice cracked, each word laced with panic. Suddenly, an ominous creaking resonated within the house. The sound clawed at the edges of her sanity, and Sarah felt a pull, an irreversible urge to flee. She turned, searching for any kind of escape, but every direction she faced melded into an endless string of shadows. They danced and coiled, claw-like hands reaching out to snag her feet. "Stick close to me," she commanded, forcing her voice to remain steady. But deep down, she knew they were in a terrifying labyrinth with no exits. As they ventured deeper into the distorted space, a flicker of familiarity tugged at her mind. A childhood drawing of sunny days, moments filled with laughter that now seemed like a cruel joke. The walls shimmered, revealing glimpses of innocence, only to dissolve back into haunting shadows. "Why is this happening? What do you want from us?" she yelled into the void, desperation echoing back. "Your past, Sarah." Mr. Thompson's voice ricocheted, now closer, taunting. "It's where all truths lie. The game's price is steep, but oh so revealing." "Shut up!" she screamed at him, instinctively shielding Eli as the shadows shifted, forming grotesque figures. They wore faces twisted in agony, muffled cries frozen in time. The sight echoed the painful realities Sarah had long buried. Regrets clawed to the surface, each one inflicting fresh wounds. "Mom, make it stop." Eli's voice quieted to a whimper, grounding her in the present even as past demons stirred. "Don't look away, Eli," she urged. "We can't give them what they want." A sudden weight pressed in, suffocating and dense. Sarah seized Eli's hand tighter, forcing herself to focus. She needed to shield him from the horrors that threatened their sanity. The air crackled with an unholy charge. Shadows twisted closer, dark tendrils forming a barrier. The phantoms of their past absorbed fragments of their fear. And then she felt it, a pulse beneath her feet. Vibrations that called to her in an agonizing rhythm. The ground broke, erupting like a volcano of despair. "Eli!" she cried out, but her words morphed into invisible chains, binding her to the horror surrounding them. She felt the venomous caress of shadows creeping up her legs, seeking to claim her entirely. Each heartbeat synchronized with the rising tide of darkness, a countdown to an unknown fate. As the ground quaked beneath them, Sarah's mind raced. What was she truly fighting against? The shadows, her past? Or something more sinister lurking behind the veil, waiting to ensnare them both? "Mom, are we gonna die?" Eli's voice trembled. "No!" she shouted, her voice as fierce as the desperation gnawing at her insides. But doubt seeped in. What if running wasn't enough? What if they had already lost the game and just didn't know it yet? Just as they teetered on the brink, the room convulsed, warping into a blinding kaleidoscope. Sarah screamed as she felt the walls close in, shadows swirling around them like vicious waters, ready to engulf them. The cacophony intensified, drowning out reason. Then a heartbeat rumbled through the air, her own pulse echoing ominously, before the world exploded into darkness. In the thick silence that followed, a voice whispered, low and haunting, "You think you can escape the truth? Your fears are just beginning to awaken." And there it was, clawing closer, an even darker shadow waiting, ready to unveil the price of their freedom. What new terror waited at the edge of this dreadful unknown? Sarah gasped as the darkness swallowed them whole, a suffocating void that seemed to stretch into infinity. Her mind raced with frantic thoughts, an internal battle raging against the rising tide of fear. Eli's grip on her hand was the only tether to reality, reminding her that they were still together amid the chaos. Suddenly, the stillness shattered like glass. The sound of laughter reverberated through the blackness, not joyous laughter, but a chilling symphony of malice. It echoed around her, full of mocking glee that felt visceral and alive. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest like a drum of impending doom. "Eli, can you hear that?" she whispered fearfully, even though she dreaded the answer. "Yeah, it's so loud," he replied, his voice cracking, panic rising with each echo. As if on cue, pinpricks of light began to ignite in the thick abyss. They twisted and flickered, illuminating the horrors that lurked just beyond reach. Figures began to emerge, haphazard shapes with grotesque features, their eyes full of malevolence. They danced just out of sight. A macabre celebration orchestrated by shadows, and every flicker of light brought a new wave of dread crashing over Sarah. "Stay close," she urged, pulling Eli behind her as if her body could be a barrier against the nightmare playing out before them. What were they? Dark reflections of fears long tucked away in the corners of her mind. Ghosts of a life she wished to forget. "Mom, they're watching us." Eli's voice trembled, and it turned her stomach to see the fear etched on his young face. "I know," she replied, forcing courage into her voice. "But we can't show them we're scared. We have to move." They took one shaky step forward, then another. Each step felt like walking through broken glass, the resonance of laughter echoing fiercer with their movement. But with each lurch, the light seared brighter, revealing flashes of memories, images of Sarah as a child, of long-lost friends, of joyful summer afternoons. These moments twisted into grotesque forms, laughter morphing into wailing cries. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper as they neared a flickering light. In the center of the glowing circle stood a mirror, its surface rippling. It beckoned them. Within its depths, she glimpsed another version of herself, a twisted reflection that hummed with darkness. "Don't look too close, Eli," she warned. But it was too late. Eli had already stepped forward, entranced by the shimmer. The air thickened, wrapping around them like chains. A scream built in Sarah's throat, but it wouldn't come out. Deep within the mirror, a hand reached out, thin and bony. "Let him go!" Sarah clawed at the dark strands, inching toward her son as she struggled to break the hold they had over his small body. In a surge of maternal instinct, she lunged for Eli. The moment her fingers grazed his arm, she felt the icy grip of despair clawing at her heart. The mirror twisted, distorting their reflections further into painful, grotesque shapes, faces lost in anguish, shadows haunted by betrayal. Just as she thought they were lost, a crack sounded, reverberating like a gunshot. The mirror fractured, cascading beams of light through the cracks. The shadows writhed angrily, shrieking, as if the brightness surged against their essence. "Run!" Sarah shouted, and together they stumbled backward, torn from the suffocating grip. She yanked Eli towards the far side of the now unsettled shadows, all the while feeling the remnants of the past clawing at her sanity. "Are they gone?" Eli's voice quaked. "I don't know!" she screamed, pulse racing, the fear coiling tighter around her heart. The laughter faded but left an unsettling silence that pressed against them like a weight. The landscape shifted again. A path both familiar and foreign unfolded, each step an inquiry into what waited beyond the next turn. "What's happening?" Eli whimpered, glancing fearfully over his shoulder. Before she could respond, the walls began to shift and shimmer once more, melding into new shapes. Dark figures whispered in the corners of her mind, growing louder, echoing ominous threats that grazed her ears. "The truth will always find you." As the dim lights flickered overhead, Sarah sensed that whatever awaited them was only just beginning to reveal itself. What dark revelation lay ahead, lurking in the shadows of their nightmarish journey? The ground beneath Sarah's feet felt alive, pulsating like a living beast. With each step, echoes of distant memories reshaped themselves into twisted forms, wailing out shrieks that clawed at her will. Eli tugged on her hand, his small fingers trembling, grounding her in the present for just a heartbeat longer. "Mum, I see them!" His voice was barely a whisper as he pointed to the wailing figures emerging from the darkness. Their faces flickered in and out of focus, resembling people she'd once known. Friends, family. They were all there, yet they felt utterly foreign, their laughter now turning to a cacophony of howls that swirled around her head. "Don't look, Eli, keep your eyes on me," Sarah barked, yanking him forward, desperation driving her, but he didn't respond. His gaze was fixed, entranced by a tall shadow that loomed ahead, its form shifting like smoke within the light. "Mom," Eli murmured, voice laced with awe and dread. "It looks like Grandpa." The shadow twisted, and for an instant Sarah could see the unmistakable outline of a man she thought she'd forgotten. "No!" The word burst from her lips before she could think, urgency piercing through her growing panic. "We have to go!" But the deeper they delved into this nightmare, the more the shadows seemed to know them. The walls warped, grotesque faces forming out of the stone, their mouths agape as they screamed in agony. Each shriek echoed her unprocessed thoughts, dragging her back to memories buried deep, a guilt she could no longer ignore. "They know us!" Eli gasped, eyes wide, skin pale. Sarah's mind raced. "Don't look at them, keep moving," she urged, but their surroundings shifted once more, the path collapsing into murky figures. Wild laughter erupted all around, a malicious orchestra that sang their fears into existence. "Mom, I can't—" Eli's voice drowned in the chaos as the shadows evolved, breaking apart to reveal a more sinister sight, a thick darkness that folded into itself, moving like thick smoke, reaching for them with cold, skeletal fingers. She fought against the terror of her own memories, her heart pounding with each awful revelation. She had hidden her past, but it wasn't done haunting her yet. "We'll find a way out," she shouted, forcing determination into her voice, yet doubt echoed within. Then something caught her eye, a flicker of vibrant light up ahead, an anomaly in this nightmare, the shape of a door. It shimmered, cracks of bright golden light bursting forth like hope. Without a thought, Sarah dashed toward it, pulling Eli behind her. "That's the way! Keep running!" But the laughter multiplied, a cascade of sinister giggles that curled around their ankles, trying to trip them up. Shadows whipped in closer, grasping at the edges of her mind with icy fingers. Just as they reached out, a loud clap echoed, halting them in place. "Stop!" a voice boomed. A figure emerged before them, cloaked in darkness, face obscured, but its eyes glinted with a knowing hunger. "You can't escape the truth, Sarah." The words slithered through the air, wrapping around her throat like a vice. She glanced at Eli, who stood trembling, eyes wide with fear. "I won't let them take you!" she screamed, but the voice continued, thick with disdain. "Face your sins, or this darkness will consume you both." In that moment, Sarah felt a surge of something primal and cold. The shadows pressed closer, ready to envelop them whole. "We still have a choice," she yelled. But deep down she wondered if that choice was slipping away, lost in the winds of their treacherous past. "Mom!" Eli's voice, raw with panic, pulled her from dark thoughts. "I'm here!" She scrambled toward him, vowing even against the encroaching void. The figure stepped towards them, the air crackling with an all-consuming darkness. "You can run, but it will always be there," it hissed. And as they stumbled back, Sarah felt the truth seep into her bones, settling into her heart, a truth she wasn't ready to face. With a sudden flash, the door swung wide, revealing a blinding white light that beckoned them. "Go!" she shouted. They raced toward it, uncertainty rushing behind them like a terrifying storm. But as they crossed into the light, Sarah couldn't shake the chilling words that swirled in her mind, persistent and haunting. "What will happen when the truth finally finds you?" Each pulse of light seemed to echo with that warning, and with every desperate breath, Sarah felt the fading grip of what had been lost. What awaited them on the other side? As the door slammed shut against the darkness, and silence reclaimed the air, the question hung heavy, suffocating, while shadows loomed, waiting for their next move. The air was thick with silence as Sarah and Eli stumbled through the doorway, blinking against the blinding light. It felt soft, almost warm, like a comforting embrace after a long, harrowing night. But just as quickly, that comfort morphed into a sickening twist in her stomach. The radiant glow dimmed, revealing an empty room, barren and stark, its walls stripped, devoid of life or color. "What is this place?" Eli whispered, voice trembling, stepping back as shadows draped themselves over the remnants of the light. Sarah clutched his hand tighter. "I don't know, but we have to stay close." She could feel a sense of foreboding wash over her, the oppressive weight of unseen eyes boring into them, watching, waiting. The walls seemed to close in like a sinister cocoon, and the realization that they had not escaped at all hung in the air like a noxious fog. Suddenly, the laughter returned. It echoed around them, bouncing off the bare walls with an almost mocking glee. It was as if the shadows were playing a cruel game, feeding on their fear as they tightened their grip on the space. "Mom, that voice!" Eli squirmed, fear etching deeper lines into his small face. It's like the voices from before." The rush of memory hit Sarah, pulling her down into the depths of despair. "They're just echoes, Eli, just echoes." But even as she whispered, her own words felt hollow. From nowhere, a figure emerged from the shadowy corners. It stepped forward, cloaked in the very darkness that bathed the room. Its form was fleeting, as if reality struggled to hold on to it. Yet its eyes were unmistakably familiar, piercing deep into her soul. "Sarah," it crooned, voice smooth and sinister. "You thought you could outrun us. Your past is a weight you carry, love. There's no escaping it." "Stop!" she shouted, backing toward Eli. Panic surged. "Leave us alone!" But the figure only smiled, an unsettling grin that revealed sharp, glinting teeth. "You've failed to confront your sins. It's time to face the truth, before it devours you." Before she could react, the walls pulsed, and images began swirling within them. Memories of laughter, joy, but then the laughter grew darker, twisted into cries of anguish. Faces morphed, loved ones morphing into distorted specters, those she had lost, those she had turned away from. "Mom, I'm scared." Eli's voice trembled, dragging her back to the present. She turned to him, pulling him closer, feeling the heat of his trembling body against hers. "I know, sweetheart. We'll get out of here. Just hold on to me," she managed, struggling to keep her composure against the rising tide of memories clawing at her sanity. Black tendrils unfurled toward them, creeping along the floor like hungry serpents. "You think you can ignore your blame, Sarah?" The figure continued, now moving in a lazy circle around them. "How many have suffered because of you?" "No!" she screamed, but it felt futile. "We didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to? How many times will you say that before you face the truth?" It taunted, its voice echoing with a dreadful authority that resonated with every painful thought in Sarah's mind. The shadows lunged, their cold fingers grazing her ankle, a biting chill running through her. "We can't let them take us," Eli shouted, struggling against the pull of their haunted surroundings. She braced herself, fear igniting her resolve. Just as the tendrils began to wrap around them, another flicker of light erupted in their midst, illuminating shards of memories tangled in the darkness. It stung her vision, but an instinct pulled her toward it. "This way!" she yelled, gripping Eli tightly as they raced through the oncoming haze. But even as they sprinted, the realization tormented her. What if the truth they were running toward was worse than the darkness chasing them? "What awaits us in the light?" Eli asked, his fear palpable in the air. As they dove into the glimmer, the laughter rose to a fever pitch behind them, drowning out any semblance of hope. And as they emerged, breathless and disoriented, an unexpected dread settled over them. They stood at the edge of a familiar place, a living room, once filled with warmth, now wrought with shadows and an icy stillness. "Why are we back here?" Eli's voice cracked. The truth lurked just beyond their sight, and Sarah felt a sinking in her chest. Could they truly escape this cycle, or were they doomed to replay the horrors of the past? As they hovered in the doorway, unsure of their next step, the chilling voice echoed behind them, sweeter yet deadlier than before. "You think you can run forever, Sarah? The end is only just beginning." With nowhere to turn, the question lingered in the air, suffocating them in relentless uncertainty. What had they come back to confront, and would they survive the truth this time? The shadows thickened around Sarah and Eli, swallowing them in a chilling embrace. Heart-pounding, Sarah scanned the room they had returned to, once a sanctuary, now stark and hollow. Shadows crept along the walls, twisting memories into sinister forms, laughter jagged into choking sobs. "Mom!" Eli's voice wavered, her heart twisted at the sight of his wide eyes, reflecting fear and confusion. She knew they had to move, to confront the darkness that lingered between the past and the present. "I'm here, Eli," she reassured him, though her own voice quaked with fear. "We'll get through this together. We have the light. We can fight." With determination, she stepped over the threshold. Instantly the air thickened, suffocating with voices from her past. Tendrils of regret wrapped around her legs, pulling her down. "Sarah." The familiar voice of her mother echoed, a haunting comfort. "You can't ignore what you've buried forever." "No!" she yelled, driving her fists against the invisible grips. "I won't listen." But the shadows twisted closer, whispering tales of failure and guilt, painting her in a corner. Eli tugged at her sleeve, the warmth of his tiny fingers burning against her skin. "What's happening?" he whimpered, tears glistening in his eyes. "Stay close! Don't let them take you!" she shouted, pulling him towards the flicker of light that beckoned them, a glimmer of hope against the mass of anguish. They stumbled over the debris scattered across the floor like remnants of an avalanche, memories littering their path. As they reached the center, a figure unraveled from the shadows, the past made manifest. It was Mr. Thompson, contorted with a sinister smile. "You thought you could escape." His voice was a slithering whisper, tearing through her resolve. "You carry the weight of your secrets. You must face them." "No!" Sarah screamed, desperate to protect Eli. "I won't let you take him away." With renewed strength, she pushed forward through the oppressive air, her eyes fixed on Eli's frightened face. "Listen to me, Eli. We're stronger than this darkness." A low hum filled the space, then silence. Shadows flared, revealing dizzying images of their lives, the laughter, the warmth, the separations. Each shadow bore witness to her failings, each one tugging at the frayed edges of her heart. "Mom!" Eli called, suddenly being pulled from her grip, drawn into the depths of swirling darkness. "Help!" Sarah lunged, her fingers barely grazing his. "Hold on!" Panic surged, driving her desperation to new heights. She fought against the tide of memories clawing at her heels. With every ounce of will, she clawed through the dark, finding a shadowy form she recognized all too well, herself. "Face the truth, Sarah," the figure taunted, throwing her past failures into her face. "You've created this prison of shame." "Shut up!" she screamed, her voice breaking, feeling the raw edge of her pain. She wouldn't let it consume her. "I didn't abandon you. I was just learning." Suddenly, a vivid light burst forth from the cracks above, illuminating their path like a beacon. The shadows recoiled, hissing. "No!" Mr. Thompson howled as Eli stepped back into the flickering illumination. "Mom, I'm so scared." "Stay with me," she cried, reaching out. "You can do this. Trust me." They raced toward the light, feeling the warmth chase the chill away. At the edge of the light, the reflections of her and Eli twisted together, intertwining memories, crafting a new story, a story of resilience, of love stronger than the shadows that threatened to imprison them. Eli squeezed her hand. "I believe in you." Together, they hurtled through the light with a final roar of defiance against the darkness, shattering the echoes of despair. The laughter turned into terrified wails as they crossed the threshold, leaving the past choking on their dust. In an instant, warmth flooded her senses, and they landed on the soft grass of their backyard under a crisp autumn sky. The sunlight wrapped around them like a protective blanket. "What happened?" Eli gasped, eyes wide, bathed in the golden glow that felt alive, spirited. Sarah stared up at the deep blue sky, her heart still racing but now filled with a sense of peace. "We faced it, Eli. We faced the truth." Tears brimmed in her eyes, but this time they were not of fear, they were cleansing. "And we won." The house loomed behind them, haunted no more, shadows now simply echoes of a darker past. They had shed the suffocating weight of secrets that clung so tight. As they embraced, the world around them felt new, fresh, every breath affirming life, hope. They were free. And behind them, Mr. Thompson remained, a flicker of shadow fading into the distance, a reminder that while the past may linger, it no longer had any hold over them. Together they walked hand in hand toward the vibrant colors of fall's last breath, ready to ignite the dawn of their new journey. This is the moment to show your support. If you loved this chilling conclusion, you need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button right now to feed the algorithm and help our community grow. Flood the comments section with your thoughts and reactions. I want to hear your theories about Sarah and Eli's journey. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this powerful conclusion. Your support means everything.